Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee Break, a brand new show from Microchip where we're going to be breaking down interesting topics all within the time frame it takes you to enjoy a few cups of coffee. My name is Clifford Swartz and I'm going to be joined by somebody who may be familiar to some of you who have seen our previous live streams, Martin Smith. How you doing, Martin?
Great, how you doing, Clifford?
I'm good. It's my first time back in the office in a while. I'm happy to be back, 6 feet away, but very excited to get started. Before we dive into the topic of remote patient monitoring, I want to throw it back to the booth so we can take care of some housekeeping things. How you doing, Wayne?
I'm actually doing wonderful this morning. It's great being back, great seeing you all. It's been a few months since we've been on live, so I'm taking a look at the chat. We have quite a few people that we are familiar with and we know. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. And I'm really happy for this new format that we're trying out. And by the way, so one of the things that I'd really like to get is your feedback. So if you would like to, let us know what you think of the format. We're basically going to try something a little bit quicker than our normal live streams, something where we're able to bring you the subject matter experts more often than we normally would, just be able to because of time constraints. And, if you want to send us a note in the chat, you want to comment, or you want to email us at livestream@microchip.com, that would be awesome. We'd love to hear from you. Like the video, share it, subscribe, hit the button, hit the bell, all the other good stuff. And I'm not going to take up too much time here, so I'm going to pass it on back to Clifford and Martin. Enjoy.
Thank you, Wayne. So, like Wayne said, this is going to be a format somewhat similar to live streams, but it'll be a little bit more fast-paced. Martin's going to go through a presentation that he has. I have a few prepared questions for him. If you guys have other questions, make sure to email us or leave a comment. Email us at livestream@microchip.com. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to try to knock all those questions out. So, yeah, I think we're ready to begin. Martin, can you tell me what has been changing in the medical field recently?
Thanks, Clifford. There's been a lot changing in the medical field, even before the COVID-19 crisis. There was basically what they're calling a digital health revolution. And so much has changed as far as the way healthcare is provided, the way we receive it, and more is coming. So I think we're just, as patients and consumers of healthcare, if you will, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And then the COVID-19 crisis, unfortunate as it's been, is just accelerating the need for a lot of things, including what we're talking about today is remote monitoring, which is also called telehealth, also called Internet of Medical Things. There's a lot of different terms that are used. So That's really what's going on.
Cool. So can you talk to me a little bit about the experience Microchip has had in this field?
Yeah, I'd love to. And that's kind of why I brought along a few different slides to show. But one thing we do is Microchip has been involved with the medical area, with supplying medical parts for many years to medical equipment companies. We call them medical device companies, which is the terminology the FDA uses. And as you can see on the slide there, this is actually just a short list of, we selected a few different ideas as far as what are the main medical applications we see, the devices that are being used, and where Microchip has parts. We've got them in clinical and hospital, equipment that's used in clinical and hospital settings. We've got them used in portable settings, in wearables, and even in implantables. When you talk about pacemakers and cardiodefibrillators, other kinds of implantables, you see Microchip has product in all of those different areas. So we've got a long legacy there.
That's a pretty long, short list, but yeah. I like it.
And we like that. And all of those are in production, in design kind of things. So we've been doing this for a long time, as I mentioned. Really one of the cool things is the group that I'm a part of, which is our medical products group. It is a focused group that basically supports medical customers. And that's why we've got thousands of customers you see on the slide there. We've been doing this we've been supplying parts to medical customers since Microchip's inception in the 90s. But since 2006, we've had this focused medical group that I'm a part of, be able to work with our own company as well as with our customers to kind of, educate and make the bridge between, the electrical part of the technology, the electronics, as well as the medical stuff. So that's really been important. I think that's unique about Microchip and why it's really important.
Nice.
Another thing is that our management has been very good about letting us engage with medical customers without really, any kind of restrictions. We can supply parts. Another good example, we supply parts to, as you see on the slide, to all types of equipment, FDA classes 1, 2, and 3. And if our viewers aren't noticeable, that the 1, 2, and 3 are different risk levels of medical devices. Okay. Class 3 being on the highest, as far as an example of that kind of device would be like an implantable, a pacemaker, cardiodefibrillator, something that they call critical life support.
Something you rely on.
Yeah, exactly. And then, somebody could die. And we have a long history of being able to supply parts 2 medical equipment companies that do Class 3 devices.
Okay.
So that's a really good part about that. And finally, I think the other thing I think is really cool about Microchip is that we have a real good history of a long-term support of our parts. As long as our customers are buying them, our history is to continue making those parts.
Right.
We've got several examples of medical companies that the design is really rather old, up to like 20 years old. I mean, they can change a few things here and there per FDA requirements, but we're basically using the same microcontroller, for example, that we designed some 20 years ago. It's still in great shape. It still does the job, and they want to keep that, so we keep making it for them.
Nice.
And that's important for our medical customers, because the last thing they want, I mean, the last thing any designer wants is to be in the middle of the design and have his part end of life or something.
And you have to go all the way back,
Right.
re-get all the certifications, which
Yeah.
takes time and money. And
Right, in medical, you've got that extra time frame for the certifications, like
Right.
you mentioned, and so that's important. You've got a longer period of time that you don't want to have to go back and start over again. So that's really important to our medical customers, the fact that we're really driven by them as far as obsolescence on our parts.
Right. Cool beans.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to mention is that with things changing, you mentioned about things changing, and one of the things that's changing in this area is something called value-based care.
Right.
And it's driving our medical customers, and those people being the hospitals, the clinics, the doctors, the medical providers. And of course, it's affecting the way our customers, the medical device companies or medical equipment companies, have to do business, have to design their product. Value-based care, I don't want to oversimplify it because it is a kind of complex topic, but the idea is ultimately that instead of charging for fees like we see on a normal bill, when you see all these codes and they charge, you may see more along the lines of the charges apply for outcomes. Has the patient been readmitted, or do they have a certain level of health they've regained,
Right.
or how they're being treated outside of hospital confines remotely, which is one of the topics we're talking about. So again, a bit of oversimplification, but that's kind of what it's about. But what that does is, again, it really augments the technology, or it really drives more technology coming into our healthcare space. You can see things like remote and virtual healthcare, some people call it telehealth.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes a huge issue. And then you break it down into things like secure IoT, connectivity, security, and doing all those types of things. The patient lifestyle, do they have to go to the doctor that often? If they have a chronic disease management for a patient, they don't have to go to the doctor that often because now they can be monitored. Readmissions to the hospital, or hospital stays being shorter.
Right.
Most people don't like to stay in the hospital that long.
Someone can heal or take care of themselves at home.
At home, and it's a much nicer environment, quality of living issues. It's
Sure.
it's really not much better. But that really drives that technology. More and more of that technology needs to be made, needs to be smart, connected, secure. That's all things we're looking at as far as what's really important in that space.
So can you talk a little bit more about the connectivity, security, and cloud aspect of this?
I can, and how that kind of drives into that. There's a few trends we're seeing as we get out of value-based care. And it's up there. We have the growing emphasis on home care, personalized medicine. That means the delivery model is different, and I just talked about that. Delivery at home,
Right.
or outside of a typical doctor's office or clinic or hospital. And in cost containment is the reality. It's a way of reducing costs in healthcare. Another thing is the transition of consumer fitness to medical. That basically means you're seeing more medical companies looking at more like the wearable type things and utilizing them, pulling them into their space, and having more medical wearables as far as monitoring patients. So patients can go about, again, their normal day,
Right.
but they can be monitored properly.
So like your wearable won't just only tell you your heart rate, it will also feed that information to your primary care physician.
Right.
And predictively tell you things about your health.
Yeah, and get that data so, it can set alarms, or however the provider wants to do that, where they know what's going on with the patient.
Which
It's like-
ultimately improves quality of life.
Oh, definitely. Quality of life, and and for the providers and for the insurance companies, there's a cost reduction there too.
Right.
So it can win all around, and that's one of the things that's really important about that.
Cool.
We see a lot of big players coming in, and again, part of that change in the healthcare models, big technology companies getting involved, obviously, from the need for technology. And finally, we see things in areas like drug delivery, where, again, not only are you being diagnosed at home, say someone's looking at your heart rate or blood pressure or whatever, but you can also actually, more and more, you're taking your medications at home.
Right.
Whether it be for like a nebulizer or an auto-injector. Auto-injector would be taking a shot at home, like in your arm or whatever. Nebulizer, I've got an example here, if you can see basically, and this is a pocket nebulizer which replaces something much bigger, and this is good for asthmatics to take their breathing treatments. And this is something, one of our demonstration designs we've done to help people get into that space.
Nice.
So it's changing that overall model.
Right.
And it's really important. So one of the things that really drives, though, you want to look at is this overall, what people call telehealth and remote monitoring. It's really part of a bigger model we're calling IoT, or Internet of Medical Things. And you see the model basically there. And I'd like to look at it on the left side. You've got the medical functions, not just the devices, but these are functions that can be mixed and matched, whether you're looking at heart rate, blood oxygen, blood pressure, temperature, or environmental and movement conditions of the patient. All that data will be connected, transmitted, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, whatever, or to a phone,
Right.
tablet, Wi-Fi router, some kind of hub in some respect, even if a cellular network, as we get into 5G and things like that. It's being done now, even as we speak, with cellular. And it goes over to the cloud end on the right side of that slide. What we got, excuse me, hospitals, doctors, providers, family, friends, or yourself monitoring the data.
Right.
Being able to look at it and see, what's going on, and it's important. So this whole model really is driven by the whole idea of, you've got smart, which we say, okay, you've got the medical devices on the left side, which are smart, they're taking the measurements.
Right.
Then you've got your connected, which is going over to your phone or a hub of some kind. It needs to be secured there also, so we don't have problems with hacking, and ultimately secure out to the cloud, so it's authenticated to one of the major cloud vendors.
Right. And so the information you're getting is actually relevant to your patient.
Right, right. And where Microchip comes into that, which is really where we play, is we offer parts in all those different areas. We have total supply medical solutions. We call it total system solutions.
Right.
Yeah.
The whole ecosystem around.
Yeah, the whole ecosystem. We don't just make microcontrollers anymore. We make pretty much everything as far as silicon is concerned. If you're talking about memory and analog, obviously, analog being used for the analog measurements of the actual measurement device in medical. Mm-hmm. You've got the wireless devices with modules and chips for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. We've got wired connectivity with Ethernet and USB. So there's a lot of different things there that we offer in parts in those areas. The secure part is really important, as I mentioned before, because we've got issues with being able to authenticate to the cloud properly. We've got issues with being able to hack in, hackers hacking into devices, and,
right.
and some demonstrations we've seen of, hopefully it doesn't really happen in real life, but of people hacking into medical devices, which is kind of a scary proposition. So security is a huge issue.
Absolutely.
And then finally, ultimately the cloud partners, which Microchip has partnered with the major cloud vendors. So we have that to get end-to-end solution with all of our parts to get you there. It's smart, it's connected, it's secure to get you from the patient, the measurement, or the treatment and information back out all the way up to the cloud vendor, where the providers or loved ones or yourself, even you can monitor yourself.
Can make use of the data and monitor.
Exactly, and there's a huge area for that.
So what else is required?
Oh, well, that's a good question.
A lot, right?
Yeah, actually. So I talked about, the connectivity, security, IoT cloud partners, but there's a baseline. If you go back to the medical devices themselves in particular, when you design, you've got to look at things like touch. The interesting thing about touch is we found that touch has been more important in this space than we originally thought, because, well, it's become a safety issue. It's important for somebody who's not a trained medical professional to be able to use the medical device at home. And old mechanical switches sometimes were not obvious as how you would use the device with the switches.
So it's more
sounds interesting,
intuitive.
but this has happened, yeah. And it's more intuitive, it's easier, looks better too, obviously sleeker, but touch is a really important part of that. We've seen touch being used more and more in the operating rooms. And you got metal over cap, be able to clean the surfaces with disinfectant and still be able to touch through surgical gloves, things like that. So a lot of areas in medical are huge with that, but in the remote monitoring area, it's huge for that, again, what you use at home. Mm-hmm. Low power has been Microchip's, one of our claim to fames, been really important in that respect. Our processes are low power. We have lots of flexible modes for microcontrollers in and out of for getting in and out of sleep and lower power modes.
Right.
And that's been huge, that's an important part.
It seems super critical for things that are like implanted, right?
Yes.
Things that don't have access to be like recharged in traditional ways.
Correct. And implantable is a new field as far as how long the batteries last, and they've generally been able to do that, but they want them to last longer, which is obvious.
Makes sense, yeah.
But overall, when you're designing, you want lower power, obviously, to be able to not discharge the batteries quickly, but you even want to be able to design with smaller batteries.
Right.
So you want a smaller footprint with a battery, with a printed circuit board. You want to be able to integrate your parts more, which kind of leads me to something else Microchip is really good at, is integration in peripherals in our MCUs. We have a thing called core independent peripherals, which we've used them for some of our medical demos to be able to reduce the amount of parts on the board, reduce the bill of materials cost of the board, which is huge when you start manufacturing and trying to get out there in a space that is patient-oriented and becoming somewhat consumer-oriented.
Right.
So that's important for them. And even for the power management schemes, whether the core can turn itself off and the intelligent peripherals can go on and go about and do their function. So that's really, again, important things to consider in design. The final aspect I mentioned has to do with the quality.
Okay.
Our quality standards are very high. We follow standards in many different standards, but I know when our customers come to audit, we follow a standard of kind of IEC 13485, which they use to audit with. We have a higher standard we're utilizing in our factories, but we're able to meet their standards for safety, for quality, for meeting the medical standards, as well as the quality they need to be able to submit their designs to the FDA.
Cool.
So there's a lot we've been doing in those areas.
So we've laid out a foundation, but what else does somebody need to really get started in designing a medical device?
Yeah, and that's a good point. We offer demonstration units, the design files for demonstration units. I mean, these are actually working units that do different functions. We use them at trade shows and in sales demonstrations. But
And the nebulizer.
Yeah, and the nebulizer, like you saw, is one of those. You see that there. And many of these are connected with security elements. We'll go into some of those here in a minute. But you can go to our website, microchip.com/medical, and you can download the design files, the schematic, the C source code, the applications note, or the user guide.
Nice.
And so, it's a good way either to validate that our parts do what you want them to do, that you can obviously, do the function, or the other part is you can get started a lot easier.
Absolutely.
You've got the baseline. You can build it up. You can prototype. You can say, hey, does what I want. You can use, maybe I want a different microchip part to do this slightly differently or add this other function. And that's one of the cool things that I mentioned before is that these are not just hardware designs. The fact that we're giving you the expertise, the jumpstart, if you will, you can mix and match a lot of these functions where you can add things together. You could have a wearable device that measures environment and movement, and you can add heart rate monitoring or
Right.
something else, blood oxygen level, things like that.
So it's very modular, and that allows people to sort of get creative on what they want to see their own device, right?
Yeah, maybe modular, what they want to see, what they want to do, and we find that obviously it's interesting when we place one of these, when someone starts with our design and they come up, and they get some real creative things going. How can I do this? Can I do this? This is really cool. This will help. I think they'll be a good medical device.
Right.
We've got requirements for something to add to it, and we're easily able to help them do that with starting with these baseline demo designs.
Cool.
So yeah, I think we've got a few we can talk about in specifics here.
Yes. So it looks like first up is the pulse oximeter.
Yeah, right. And so what the pulse oximeter does, many people are familiar with it. If you've been in a hospital or seen somebody in a hospital, got a little finger clip on.
Right.
And that finger clip goes back to a patient monitoring system, and inside the patient monitoring system is a pulse oximeter, which measures your simple heart rate, how many beats per minute, as well as your blood oxygen level. Call it SpO2 or blood oxygen levels. So we've developed a demo, which is rather unique in the fact that most pulse oximeter designs use an analog front end that's somewhat complex and tends to be kind of expensive.
Okay.
And so we were looking at how do we get the size of the board down, the cost of the board down, and still make this a robust way to measure heart rate and blood oxygen levels. And we utilized one of our DS-PIC engines, or DSC MCUs, to do that. And so basically the DSC is doing the heavy-duty filtering to get all that signal out, because you're getting a signal from tissue through light-based source, LEDs and the photodiode. And you filter all that out, and you get a nice clean signal. You may be able to see it, maybe hard in that graphic. You see the noisy red signal down the lower right-hand corner,
Right.
and you can barely see there's a nice clean green signal going through, which is
I do see that, yeah.
Yeah, so the input's a noisy red signal, and the output is a nice green signal doing all the filtering.
It's a powerful change. I like it.
Yeah, so you've got your MCU and filtering now combined. Your front end now is just two simple op amps with a passive filter, and there you go.
Nice.
It's a lot simpler in that respect, and a lot more of a lower cost type of implementation.
Now, I think we may have a question. Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you are absolutely correct. We actually have a lot of questions.
That's good.
You guys were flowing so well that I tried to keep, I wanted to keep you guys going and keep you guys moving. I also want to tell you that unfortunately our stream dropped out for just a few minutes. So,
Oh,
no. So there may be a piece of it, a piece of your presentation, Martin, that some of the folks online didn't get to hear, but it looks like we're kind of back on track.
Okay.
So a couple of questions here. Let's see. The first question is from Nuno from the original stream. He wants to know if Microchip's ADCs are certified for use in medical applications, and I want you to kind of discuss that a bit.
Okay. That's actually part of a broader topic, and it's really a good question because I hear this type of question all the time. The important thing to remember about, and we'll try and keep this, not too long-winded, but the FDA puts the responsibility, if you will, for what they call suitability on. That's the responsibility of the medical device manufacturer, our customers. It's laid out very clearly in the FDA guidelines that suppliers, Microchip and anybody else that supplies to medical device companies, is not responsible. What that means is we're not trying to get away from anything. It just means that's the way it is. So parts don't have to be certified per se. The part suppliers don't. So ultimately what we do is we recommend our parts for what's called the suitability analysis that our medical clients or medical customers have. They will determine the suitability of the parts, and medical customers constantly are using standard parts, whether it be ADCs, MCUs, a lot of different types of parts. And so we give them the quality data, the reliability data, all the things they need to help them with their suitability analysis for the FDA. So ultimately, the medical field really uses a lot of standard parts. It's interesting how many standard parts are really used and are not really classified because they don't really classify them for medical. There are a few parts out there in the world that people have extra manufacturing, they have special labs and things like that. We have some implantable radios that are part of our Microsemi acquisition that do have a special manufacturing area that they do those in, which just increases the amount of data that's available to the customer to be able to use for the suitability analysis. Nice. And that's pretty much an oversimplification, but so generally speaking, all of our parts, we use them in all types of medical equipment.
Sure. Simply put, yeah.
Awesome.
Any other questions, Wayne?
Tons more. I'm going to let you decide whether you want to take another one or we want to kind of finish out and then we'll take some more.
Well, I think let's go through the rest of the sort of starting design files that people can get
Okay.
their hands on. Then we can have a big session on Q&A.
Perfect.
Cool.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. The next one I want to talk about actually is in addition to that pulse oximeter design.
Okay.
Microchip came up with these incredible IoT development boards, which I love. You see on the slide that little red board down at the bottom. And what we did is we married up our pulse oximeter, which was an example of any kind of medical device, and married up with an IoT development board. Now the board by itself has an MCU, has a secure element, and either Wi-Fi or Bluetooth chip, depending on which board you get. And what we did in this case was we set up the pulse oximeter using the Wi-Fi development board to be able to use the Wi-Fi as a connected part, to be able to go to a router or to a phone or whatever your hub is basically.
Right.
And then there's a secure element in ECC 608A, which is a secure element that is provisioned or programmed to be able to interface with the cloud vendor. So it's basically all-encompassing. You can immediately get up, on this case, the Google Cloud Platform, which is the board we use for the demonstration. We could have used any of the boards for the other cloud vendors also that we've got, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, we've got the different flavors of the boards. But basically the demonstration to show whatever medical device you've got, you can easily get that up on the cloud. So you've got your measurements, which are the smart part, all the measurements being done properly and robustly. You've got the connected part, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. You've got the secure part, authenticated to the Google Cloud or to any of the cloud vendors that we support, which is all the major ones. So
cool.
That's a neat thing about that. So it's a really, again, easy way to get started.
Right.
If you want to, all of a sudden, I got a medical device, I got cloud connectivity, I can start
really
from there.
quickly get into
Yeah,
the
I've got a
cloud.
lot of the hard stuff done. Other than that, certification is obviously the next hard part, but
yeah.
but we've got a lot of that. You can get going faster towards that end.
Cool.
One of the other ones I want to show is the ECG. It is a connected, actually secure as well as wearable type of device. Basically, this is used for the space. We see more and more ECG in the fitness area. Usually, those are pretty simplified. This is a little more complex. Again, being used for if you were to do something wearable or portable emergency type of application, you can get the ECG or EKG, some people call it, get the waveform. We show it on a tablet. You can get the waveform on an Android tablet. And again, we've got all the different pieces. We've got a SAML 22 Cortex M0 Plus MCU. We've got a Bluetooth module a Bluetooth low energy module for BLE. We've got one of the secure elements.
Nice.
And so again, you can connect to the cloud securely. You can set it up so you can, we've done some things we're working on to show how to stop hackers and things like that. So they're trying to hack into a device or look like a rogue app. It's masquerading as the real app or the real server or the real cloud server or whatever.
Right.
So there's a lot of different things you can do with that. And then So we've got those chips. We've got memory on that chip for external memory needs. We've got a cardio bio chip from a partner called NeuroSky. So we've been able to put a whole lot of things together to give you that overall. Here's how I can do, I can do simple heart rate. I can do complex ECG. I can look at stress and heart rate variability and RR intervals and things like that. So the baseline to get some other interesting things going if you want to go and develop even more complex cardio measurements, cardio algorithms with a cardiologist or something like that. So it's been a real interesting and very a good demo.
Cool.
One of the things I talked about before was this transition from consumer to medical.
Right.
And you see that a lot in the wearable space. And the next demo we're showing here is basically we call our ultra low power connected wearable or medical activity tracker baseline or whatever you want to call it. But again, this has got all of it. It's got a SAML21, Cortex M0 Plus MCU. It's got a BLE module. It's got again the ECC 508A module for security.
And all transmitting to somebody's phone, right?
Right. And this you could do it to a phone, to a tablet. You can do it anywhere to Bluetooth. You can change the design later to do Wi-Fi or whatever you want. But in this case, we're showing you can go to Bluetooth, which is pretty common. And this is a wearable device. And again, as a baseline, that says this device, starting off with what we give you is you can measure. Obviously, you can get step count. You can measure if the patient falls. You can measure proximity to things with Bluetooth. You can do gyroscopic measurements. So if you want to do sleep studies, you can build software around that.
Nice.
Is the patient rolling around? There's a light sensor, so you can also measure the light for like sleep studies or something like that.
Sure.
You've got humidity, you've got a sensor, you've got elevation, you can look at a lot of different things that would affect a patient to look at, hey, my patient's going uphill, I see that in the elevation. And if I've added heart rate on a design, I can look at their change in heart rate. So it's a good baseline for a wearable device. You can start with this, add other functions that Microchip offers with our parts. So it's a good baseline tool to get in this medical wearable space.
Nice.
And these are just, a lot of things. And I think the last one around is interesting. When we talk about drug delivery, I showed you our nebulizer. This is another one we use for drug delivery. It's a connected functional safety syringe pump auto injector, which is a long term.
Yeah.
But because it's doing a lot, basically. It is Bluetooth LE connected. And with any drug delivery device, there's a thing that medical providers need called patient compliance. They want to be able to see if you're using the device properly. Are you getting the right dose? Are you taking it at the right time? Are you misusing the device or out of ignorance not doing it properly or whatever? So you've got that connection. With this one, we're also using 2 sensors that basically look at the position, how much fluid is in the syringe.
Right.
So you can see how much has been delivered and how much is not, if the whole dosage has been taken or whatever. There's another sensor that looks at the size of the syringe. We can interpolate that out to, am I using the right size syringe or what type of syringe am I using? So again, a patient compliance check. Is it being utilized properly? And then motor driving, we're driving a motor basically to do the syringe. So in this
push the syringe.
Yeah, pushes
right.
the syringe, and you've seen pumps like this before. Probably if you've been to a hospital, or even some people have these for insulin type of applications if they're diabetic. But this one's really nice in the fact that besides having all these functions, we're utilizing our functional safety libraries. Functional safety, medical standards are a big deal. They're becoming more and more a big deal over the last few years.
Absolutely.
And so our compilers, for example, are qualified to IEC 62304, which is a software maintenance and standard. We have functional safety standards that all of our libraries support, the functional libraries with our microcontrollers. One that 62304 calls out, which is used, is 61508. And that one, we've got the compiler again, it's qualified for that. We're using the functional libraries, and it gives you an example of how to use a functional safety library in your device by looking at by utilizing the code here. And we got other examples out on the web for functional safety on our functional safety site. But this is one of our implementations of how to utilize functional safety library for this type of application. In this application, usually we see our customers take things, they'll obviously make the motor smaller and delivery systems a lot smaller with their expertise in the motors and in industrial design and motor design.
Right.
But we've got the electrical part that will drive any of these motors, and you can do either a syringe pump type application or even an auto injector, which I mentioned before, which for those who are not familiar with it, this is the way people can give themselves injections at home under a doctor's care. It will make sure you've got the patient compliance part of it will be looking to see if you set it down right, the auto injector. if you inject the needle at the right angle, if you take the medication, take all the medication, things like that. And these are things you can build on with this type of design. This is the electrical proof of concept.
Right.
Get you started with it. So you've got a couple different options with drug delivery, and again, connected for the patient compliance aspect and functional safety to build on the standards and help you make your case to the FDA.
I like how modular everything is, and it's a very good foundation. So you can take one thing, mix and match with something else, and make something entirely new. And all of these and more are able to be found by you guys at Microchip/medical. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then you can drill down each of the applications and find the sites that talk about each of the demos. You can download the files.
Find every single file you want. On the most recent one you did, there's a little 3D part that I got to 3D print, so I got to work on that. That was fun for me. But yeah, I believe that's all the design files that you wanted to show
Yes,
off
that's
right
all I
now.
want to talk about. We have more, but I just wanted to show things that tend to be more along the lines of smart, connected, secure.
Right.
The
Fit the theme.
Internet of Medical Things type model, the remote monitoring type thing, yes.
Cool. Well, I think we're ready for questions, Wayne. What do
All
you
right.
think?
I think we have an onslaught of questions. So
I'm ready.
This is kind of fun. This is going to be fun. So we're going to basically run as long as we can until our video team decides that we need to get kicked out of the studio here.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with a comment from LinkedIn from Patrick McDade. He basically says, or his question was basically about the coronavirus and its impact on user interface. And he's wondering if you've noticed an uptick in touch and gesture type of technology being sought after in light of what we're experiencing.
Yeah, good question. It's interesting, as a side note to that, we're seeing a lot more interest in just contactless type stuff, like soap dispensers and things like that. That's happening in the consumer space. But for medical, yes, it kind of caught a lot of people by surprise, but there's a lot more talk now about that. Touch being one. Metal over cap's good for cleaning, disinfectant I mentioned. We may see more of that, so you can disinfect surfaces a lot easier, depending on whatever type of touch system you're using. Gesture, I expect to see a lot more. I'm hearing again more talk about it. It's been something that's always been interesting. People like that idea, like in the movies where you just move your hand back and forth and something really cool happens, And so we're hearing a lot more chatter about that, and we expect to see probably a lot more implementation of that, whether it be for COVID-19, which has accelerated some interest in that area, as well as other areas that are important to use that in for be hands-free type areas.
Right. So you've already seen sort of a shift or a gradual or increase in interest for touchless or gesture-based things.
Right.
But COVID has been accelerating, right?
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot more things. And so, a lot of people are scrambling in a lot of areas to cover that. They're covering, a lot more interest in COVID-19 is changing the model, is accelerated, as I mentioned before. So we're seeing, things with ventilators and respiratory devices, with pulse oximeters, like we showed you a demonstration, with thermometers, just a reinsurgence of, we need a lot of these things right now. We need them now, we need them fast. And we've been inundated, but happily able to supply, the needs of our customers during this difficult time.
Right.
Awesome.
What else you got, Wayne?
All right. Let's see. From Pankaj, he wants to kind of understand what the life cycle is of that nebulizer demo that you've shown, and kind of what that's dependent on.
Okay. Wow, life cycle. I mean, the design life cycle, I would guess. I'll have to kind of guess. Here a
Actually,
little bit.
the lifetime of the of an actual device.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So
okay.
how long does certification last? That may be hitting at something close to
Well, the certification, it just lasts for that design. Unless the company does a major change on the device, it'll change. That's why I mentioned that we have some designs that don't need to change.
Okay.
And so we keep supplying the parts for years and years and years. With the nebulizer itself, well, this one, again, if it doesn't change, it won't change the certification. The use time is a good question, and that usually is left up to the manufacturer. The interesting thing about this one is we have a secure element in this particular chip that I didn't mention, but we have a secure element that basically, if you would like, the top part of this being the medicine cup, the clear part if you can see it, and the bottom part being basically the electronics unit. And this is a vibrating piezo disc. And so that's kind of the beauty of this one. This is actually where we use core independent peripherals, where we were able to use a single chip implementation versus lots of extra chips that most nebulizers use. And to do this, basically it's a single MCU is all that is needed. So when you marry that up with a security chip, is that it not only will say this is the correct medicine cup to use, to make sure you don't get counterfeits, but it also has a counter. And so if you'd like, you can count the amount of times it's been used, and then if it gets past a certain lifetime of use, which hopefully this answers your question, when it gets past a certain time, then we say, hey, the manufacturer says you need to buy another one. So I don't know what specs they actually use, but this particular brand, this was actually based, a company used this for our design to actually make a commercial version of this. And so I believe they have a pretty long lifetime, but I couldn't say for sure. It would be based on the actual device manufacturer for this device.
Yeah, and I think your applications engineer counterpart, Zhang, actually weighed in on the kind of a technical answer to that question. The answer is kind of it depends. Basically, he says it depends on the characteristics and quality of the piezo mesh disc. So basically, that mesh can wear out.
Yes.
And it's basically specified by whoever manufactures the device as to what life cycle they need for that mesh. So it can be it can be a little or it can be a lot.
Oh, good. No, appreciate the clarification on that, because the mesh is critical on that, and the meshes vary from type of device. So that'll be part of the overall, medical device manufacturer's spec. Will probably be based a lot around the disc, the metal disc. Yeah.
All right. Let's
What else
see.
you got?
Let's see. Where are we going next? Let's talk about security.
Okay.
So there's a lot of talk in the chat, and there's probably 7 or 8 questions, and I don't want to go through each and every one of them because they're kind of all along the same lines. But I want you guys to have a bit of a kind of a weigh in on what we've done as Microchip to enable our customers to secure the transmission of the data, not just the transmission of the data from patient to doctor, because we're all talking about remote monitoring here. So the doctor is not in the same place as the patient. So what have we done to help that, and what have we done to ensure the security of the actual device?
So I think that harkens back to something that you've mentioned just recently, how that device, the nebulizer, can intelligently tell whether or not the little canister put on it is the correct one to do.
Yeah, we call that peripheral authentication. I think so that's one important part of security, is just protecting your investments. You don't get counterfeits for peripherals or disposables that go with your medical device. But the other, that's a big part of what we've done in security overall. The other part of it, there's a lot. It depends. We have security embedded in the MCUs. We have the secure elements for cloud authentication, as well as peripheral authentication like that. That big question, if you use that telehealth model when you're talking to your doctor, realize that it's that signal before it really gets to the doctor is more than likely going through a cloud server, either a secure server of some kind or a public cloud server with security. And so the fact that not only do we offer secure elements or security in the MCUs, but authenticating to the cloud properly, which is a security measure.
Right.
But there's a lot of different areas. We have you can look at, I know you can have security embedded in the MCU, which can do a lot of different things. It can hide different parts of the MCU from somebody trying to hack into it, or even trying to physically break into the MCU if they get access, depending on what type of MCU it is. You've got it where you're double encrypting basically, which is nice because you can encrypt internally in the MCU and some of our crypto engines, as well as then you get the extra encryption from the AS128 over Bluetooth or whatever.
Right.
So you got a double encryption. So I know I've talked to, we have a white hat hacker we talked to sometime back, and he was saying it is really helpful to do that kind of encryption because most guys they want to hack into the Bluetooth is one of the weak spots. And if they get into that, well, if the data's still encrypted from the MCU, then it makes it a lot harder. And so there's that level of encryption, for hacking in. There's a level of trying to hack into the cloud server. We talked about authentication. Mm-hmm. Is the cloud recognize the medical device? And then that data eventually will go to a doctor, and he's probably going to have security link from the cloud server or whatever server, back down to his laptop or any of his devices that are getting the data. So you've got all around, you've got the security aspect. So again,
protecting the data basically every step in the journey.
Yeah,
right?
And that's really important, again, because there's been a lot in the press about protecting, databases. Somebody hacks into a medical database, which is, that medical data is very valuable. And unfortunately, when it gets sold, it's kind of bad news all around. Mm-hmm. But then there's, like I said, there's all those points of transmission inside the MCU, from the MCU to the phone, from the phone to to the router or or ultimately to the cloud server, the cloud server back to a laptop in the doctor's office or whatever. So multiple points, that can be weak spots. So Microchip is basically offering, parts to help you shore up whatever those weak spots happen to be
Right.
in the chain, and you're basically in your remote monitoring or telehealth model.
And so not only is it supplied, the different starting points that we talked about earlier, they all actually use that. So people can go into the code base, people can go into the design files and actually see the secure element being used in devices.
Right, and for whether it be the code you develop, we have libraries of code available. The secure elements many times are provisioned within Microchip
Right.
per your specifications. That way, they're secure. They're provisioned in a secure environment, so no one can get hold of it, including even if your medical device is being manufactured by a third party, and you may be concerned about the third party gaining access to security. Again, we lock it down in our secure facility. It's provisioned, it's programmed, and then really it's extremely difficult for anybody to get in that way.
Right. What else you got, Wayne?
Okay. Also, Zheng is also adding his comment to the security concern. He basically says that the ECC 608 device is also helping protect the user data that's being passed to the cloud. And basically, it's our crypto authentication chip. Let's see. Jared wants to know. He said, "Is that an AT SHA-204A?"
Yes, in the device, yeah, it's an AT SHA-204 device in this one. And we utilize that one. This one we developed a while back, and the 204 was a really good fit at the time. We could move forward if we did this one again with probably a 608A now.
Awesome. Let's see. Where do we go from here? We have a comment that this is just something for you to think about, Martin. We actually have a comment about maybe offering an online certification, or online course for engineers who really want to be to kind of up their game in the medical device design arena.
As far as FDA certification kind of stuff?
In general?
Yeah, in general.
Well, basically, I mean, the FDA is kind of the leader worldwide, so if you can understand them, you're probably going to be able to certify in any country. A few years back, we had one of our medical design partners actually offer a class at our master's conference that had a lot to do with either certifying with the FDA. We had another one with a design partner and some of our engineers talking about, I believe it was the nebulizer, actually, they use as an example about, again, what's an example that goes through FDA. So again, wherever you get access, if you have access to those files from masters or can get access to them, there's some really good course material on that available.
Okay, and
Cool.
I'm assuming that the design partner in question was Patrick Marcus. Is that
Was it?
or am I-
Patrick's done a lot of cool stuff for us,
But not
and he
now.
really understands standards. He wasn't involved with those, unfortunately.
Okay. I was going to say maybe we can get him on.
That'd be great.
So one of the things that I actually want to do is just to address a lot of the questions that we have about security. Knowing that you're a medical industry expert and not necessarily a cybersecurity expert, Martin. I don't want to throw you a lot of the questions that.
That way, I think we're having somebody else come about security in a few weeks.
Yeah,
or something.
I think what we'll
Yeah.
do is we'll bring some security experts on to have that level of discussion. And let's see. So Nuno asked, let's see, if any Microchip microcontrollers have RAM ECC. And to spare you from thinking about answering that question, check the SAM-D51 family. That's one of the ones. Let's see. We have another question on the ADCs.
Okay.
Basically, the question is, let me go back and dig it up. Do we have any standalone ADCs that we recommend specifically for medical applications?
Yeah, that just depends on the applications. I mean, you can use pretty much any of them in Class 1, Class 2 applications, and probably most of them in Class 3.
Okay.
Again, that gets down to specific design questions and usually we get, either if you're buying through a distributor or through our sales channels or whatever, we look at, if you want help, look at the design and kind of go from there. So I wouldn't worry so much about certification. It really has more to, as far as the parts, it has more to do with understanding what it is the FDA is looking for. And that's part of just gaining experience. If you if you work for a medical device manufacturer now, you're probably very familiar with that type of thing. Getting started, again, it's the FDA or the certification is the difficult part. So learning more about that, again, I've got the master's courses that Microchip offers, and there's probably other sources out there that can help with that.
Okay.
But again, most of the parts, we technically use the term refer for suitability analysis versus recommend. Basically we say for medical parts, and all of our standard parts for class 1, class 2 applications, and we also refer the vast majority of our parts for class 3. So it's a broad question, so it kind of gets back to, unfortunately, that it depends question, but I would say, generally speaking, you look at what it is and the specs you've got.
Okay. So I have a question from Patrick I wanted you to kind of chew on here. Could you talk a bit about medical device classifications 1 through 4 per FDA and impact on design validation, for example, pacemakers versus thermometers, and how IoT might further complicate clearing the government regulations?
Wow, there's a lot there. Where do I start?
So first of all, what's he talking about, the medical device classifications?
Yeah, and again, various in modes. The general classifications I mentioned before, we have to do with risk levels. And so the higher the number, the higher the risk level that you go up.
Gotcha.
And we know that, so we tend to see things life critical, life support at the highest levels of that. How it is validation, it is a little trickier as you get into IoT. Basically, you look at the connectivity piece in general, and we get into issues like, what they call SOUP, is software of unknown pedigree. Yeah, and that's basically, if you're taking off-the-shelf software, how do you go through certification using a stack on a Bluetooth device or something else? So there are certain standards to follow and recommend those to FDA as far as your overall suitability analysis. The IoT model security is going to be more of an issue. The FDA has been issuing guidelines more and more on security, as well as they've been doing on standards. So we're seeing more and more of that overall. So it is evolving, it's changing. And then specifics, again, it depends on the application. A thermometer is a whole different ball of wax than a more complex or implantable device. So again, the standards, what standards you're using, how you go to suitability. Not as stringent for a thermometer, obviously, as an implantable device. So there's a lot to play there. So again, a lot of different answers, and it gets back to, it kind of depends on applications. It also depends on the quality management system of the manufacturer. And people meet those standards differently, but still meet them. And ultimately they make, with experience, obviously, they meet their FDA certification.
Okay, awesome. So let's see. I am going to, with that, since we're basically in about 48 minutes, and our goal was to keep this fairly short, as in coffee break short.
Right.
So what I can do is, if you have any other questions, send them to livestream@microchip.com. Also, if you have a kind of an invention you'd like to share with us, maybe we can use that as an inspiration for our next live. Send it over to livestream@microchip.com. And Clifford, I'm going to pass it back to you and
Cool beans.
close it for us.
So, like Wayne mentioned, this was a topic that's pretty hotly mentioned on social media. If you guys have any other thing that you want us to do a deep dive, Microchip has a wealth of talent that we can pull from, and we'll try to get the information to you. But I'd like to give a special thank you to Martin for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody who behind the camera has helped this become a thing, and I hope everybody at home stays safe and healthy. Thank you very much.